Unless you know where you've come from, you don't know where you're going. What are you going to change? What are you going to disrupt? You cannot ignore artificial intelligence. You ignore it at your peril. I warn you of that.
How do we start reinventing ourselves?
The answer comes from the people completing the task today, because they know what they do. The biggest disruption I see coming is Web3, is the next generation of the internet.
Hello there. For my first conversation on my channel, I'm talking to Mark Harrop. Well, if you're in the fashion industry, you just sat up and took notice. If you're not in that industry, you should know that when Mark's name is mentioned, people sit up, pull out their notepads and start taking notes. Mark just celebrated 50 years in the fashion industry. He has pioneered some of the major disruptions that took part in over the course of his career. He advises the biggest global brands in this world. Everyone wants to hear what he has to say. We'll be talking about how the industry needs to adapt to the new developments in artificial intelligence. And we'll discuss how the brands and the businesses need to prepare for this new world. And also, what does it mean for employability and the skill sets needed going forward? Hi, Mark.
Hi, Gore. Thank you for that kind introduction. It's very flattering.
Well, you deserve it. So tell some of the audience, obviously, that don't know you, haven't heard of you, a bit about yourself. How's the past, all these past disruptions that you've seen over your amazing career, maybe different to the AI revolution that's come?
Well, like you say, it's been a long journey. Shocked that I've reached 50 years in the industry. So I started in 1974 as a 16-year-old who came into a factory based here where I am, actually, in Manchester in the UK. The company I joined was one of the largest companies in the UK at the time. We employed around 1,300 people. They were located in different areas of the country. So we had them here in Manchester. We had factories in Scotland, a couple. We had factories in Ireland. We made career wear, everything from diving suits to pilot uniforms and everything in between. We made baby wear. And because it's always raining in Manchester, we were the largest manufacturers of umbrellas. But when the sun came out, we also did pub umbrellas as well. So you know what it's like for the UK people in pubs. So I joined in the cutting room, and as a young guy, I could see that we were very inefficient, and I wanted to make change. I wanted to do things neater and smarter, and I got the opportunity to become the supervisor of that cutting room after working hard in there, and started then to make change. Over 18 months, we doubled the production through those changes, which was quite an achievement for what had been pretty much set in stone all the time. This was 10,000 umbrellas per week, and we got that up to 21,000, and that number sticks in my mind forever. And we achieved this by change. We implemented new methods. And when I say methods, like method engineering in those days, we were talking about ergonomics, how we would bring material to the point where we were going to cut it and use it and so on. How we would enable that material to run faster, and how we would hem the sides of the material and so on. So we literally engineered new folders that we attached to machines. And that change was recognized by the chairman of the company then, who was the founder of the Clothing and Footwear Institute. And he came along and spotted what I'd been doing, and then he took me, fortunately, under his wing. And then I went through a fast path up the management ladder. I then became a work study engineer, and I looked at motions and methods, staying in the ergonomic world. How do we change this workstation? How do we change this operator seats and so on and so forth? And then started to use new equipment, new technology, overhead rail systems to bring the product to the point of sewing, rather than working out of big trucks and bundles and so on. So and that went to time study. So I became a time study engineer, and I started to, rather than go onto the factory floor with a stopwatch, which I started with, by the way, I found this new company called GSD, General Sewing Data, and they were doing synthetic costings where you would deliver a cost based on motion. So they would video somebody doing an operation 1,000 times until we got a mean average of that time. And that went down to minute operations. And I'm doing this like this, say literally centimeters or inches. And whether this was a perfect straight line or whether it was a slightly curved line or it was a very deep curve where the operator would take longer to do the motion. Then I became a production manager of the operation in 1982. I remember it well because it was when I got married, actually. I did that for a couple of years, and then I was promoted into a factory of my own. So that meant I had my own factory, my own warehouse, my own cutting room, my own boiler room, a couple of hundred machinists working for me. And basically it was rolls of fabric and trims and components coming in at one end of the factory and finished product garments coming out at the other end of the factory. And my job was to re-engineer this factory from scratch. That was an amazing experience, and one that was very frightening for somebody who was only then 23 years old, coming in the morning and having that responsibility for all those people. And then having the chairman who would go around from Manchester to Goulburn, Wigan to Scotland and Ireland and check on his operation. And I was always there trying to show him that on every visit we've moved forward and changed things that he had implemented, actually. So one of those biggest changes, and I'm coming to the end of my manufacturing career, let's say, was the introduction of CAD/CAM systems. So I started to read and look and research about new systems, because back then we were all manual when it came to the cutting operations. And I found a company in Dallas, Texas, in the USA, called Microdynamics. They've been using the new personal computers instead of, in those days, mainframes and mid-range computers. They started to use personal computers. I looked at the traditional companies of Gerber and Lectra at the time, a couple of these. They were operating on DOS, digital operating system, which for those who don't know, was black and white screens, basically, or black and green screens for those older people like me who remember those days. And they were awful. Let's just say that. It was a living nightmare because things went wrong a lot of the time. We didn't have much disk space. If we didn't have discs, we had tapes. I forgot that. And it was tough. But so I decided to go out and do something completely different. I wanted to find something that was a leapfrog technology that was going to take me into the next world and the next sort of chapter, if you like. So this Microdynamics company was doing things differently. It was, for a start, it was using color graphics. And back then, color, it was wow. It was a real wow moment. It was like me running down to Mrs. Bailey's down the road to see that they got the first color TV in our village, and I could go and see it because before that we're using black and white TV. Shows how old I am, by the way. And bringing that into industry was even more amazing. So I went over to Texas and looked and fell in love with this product, brought it back, and that was essentially the end of my manufacturing career, because I decided it was time for me to move to my new chapter, which was to take that 11 years of manufacturing knowledge at the grand old age of 25 and move into the world of tech. And then I've spent my next 40 years in tech. I'll take a breath.
Yeah, so Through our many hours of conversations, we've always been talking about the digital technologies. We're living more in a digital world than you started with. We've talked about how certain technologies have changed that industry, the fashion industry. In manufacturing, of course, you've got more automation. More and more you've got machinery like digital print to fabric or digitally controlled machines to knit shoes, to knit clothes. You can talk about those disruptions, but then what is the difference now that artificial intelligence has come along? How have those disruptions kind of played a part? And is this just an extension, or do you see any difference?
Number one, I see massive difference, but let me articulate what that means. And I think it's important. Let's go back again. Unless you know where you've come from, you don't know where you're going, right? You need to know where you've come from, where you're going. What are you going to change? Hopefully, what are you going to disrupt? What are you going to improve? So we started with CAD/CAM, right? We started with making patterns for both footwear and for apparel. We started to use color on screens. It made the job that much more interesting. It made it more efficient. And even back then, Gore, we use what we called automatic marker making. Now, to some people, they'll go back and say, yeah, that's right. We put all these patterns on a marker. We press the button. The automatic marker would run and produce these markers, and then we tweak them. We'd make them a little bit more efficient. We'd tilt the pattern by a degree or 2 degrees at most. Beyond that, you start getting pucker in your seams. So we try to keep it perfectly on grain if we could. We'd butt all the pieces together and so on. That, back then, in the late 80s, was AI. That was AI in action. Because if you think about that, that's a simple algorithm that's taking a piece, and from that piece, it's tilting it, it's butting it up to the next piece, and so on and so forth. But it's mathematics. It's an algorithm that says, take that piece, move it this way, move it by a degree. So actually, AI was there. We didn't understand it. We didn't call it AI. It was software. It was coding. We didn't even call it I don't even remember calling it an algorithm at the time. And it was actually 1985. We introduced Microdynamics, the company I work for from the States. We introduced FDS systems, that's footwear design systems. And in there, we came from an engineering focus rather than a design focus. So it was about building that shoe in a three-dimensional way and grading that shoe and so on and so forth. So the first introduction of what people know today as 3D DPC was actually way back then in the mid 1980s, late 80s. And then around 1999, you started to see apparel 3D DPC systems coming into play. And I do remember that well, because a little story, I do remember 2 young men coming to see me, and I was actually in Atlanta at the time, attending an exhibition called the Bobbin Show, which our American listeners will recognize. And these 2 young guys came along, and they came from Israel. And they were asking me, how do we get into the fashion industry? What do we do? And how do we get involved in this 3D world and so on? These were the founders, actually, of Browswear. And that was 1999. And we know the story since then for the last 24 years. We've seen that entire 3D becoming 3D DPC, that digital product creation, and that ecosystem expanding, ever expanding. Because of intelligence, artificial intelligence will take a lot of that manual effort out and auto sew, auto stitch in 3D. And so that was that side, CAD/CAM 3D, and then product data management in the late 1980s, which became in 1995 CPM, Collaborative Product Management. That's the acronym we first gave what you and I know today as product lifecycle management. We called it CPM, Collaborative Product Management. We were using the internet in 1995. And I feel this is so important to say this. It's so timely because when I think of 1995 and the internet coming to the world and starting to be commercialized, I went to brands back then and to retailers around the UK and Europe and rest of the world and talked to them about this. And in some cases, they said, come in, talk, work with us, develop something. And in other cases, in a lot of cases, they said, no, you're talking Star Trek. Thank you very much, but go away. And they sent me away. Now, for some of those companies, they survived. Even so, they were slow, but they survived. There are many names that I remember, brands that went to the wall, that are no longer, they're only in memories of people like me. They've gone because they didn't change. And I can't emphasize this enough. You cannot ignore artificial intelligence in the different forms it takes. You know, whether it's a large language model that's on maths and text, words, or whether it's a generative AI model on voice, video, images, and things like this. No matter what it is, you can't ignore it. If you do ignore it, you ignore it at your peril. I warn you of that. And I'm going to say from my own experience, do not become one of those companies that went to the wall because you didn't listen. Trust me on this. You know, when people said the internet wouldn't take off in 1995, I look back now and go, look. And by the way, that's another important thing here is we had Internet 1, was when we came and we created the internet. We made some appalling mistakes. You know, people like me, we were running very fast and we were developing, we were taking product data management to product lifecycle management, PLM. And the difference between the two was we were taking data and we were operating that workflow over the internet, okay? What we missed, the glaring obvious thing that we missed was that our manufacturing base was already offshore. So it was in China, it was India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, all the traditional countries that started craft industry. And what we found was that the telecommunications weren't up to the speed that the West was up to. So here we are, we're building an internet, and we've got to remember, some of us, again, older people will remember those modems that went at 28K and 56K. In 1995, that's what we had. And it wasn't until the late 90s and the early 2000s that we started to have 126K lines and things like that. And then we had to wait for the East to catch up, the rest of the world, before we could really communicate. But what it did do, it gave us the opportunity to build the modules and that sort of end-to-end workflow, get over the problems, solve the problems, because there were many, many problems, printing issues, speed issues, there was all sorts of things. But we resolved those problems in a confined and manageable way before we started to collaborate in a sort of dynamic way, end-to-end collaboration, real time.
So all these disruptions you've seen happen were building blocks. They were ways of making things more efficient, but also ways of adding more opportunity, adding more potential for small companies to large companies to do more.
Yeah.
My question is that whether artificial general intelligence, or not general, actually generative, let's stick to generative.
Yes.
General, we'll talk maybe. Yeah. Those two words, can get mixed up. But with generative AI, do you see any change or difference in the effect that it's going to have on companies, on businesses, and the industry as a whole?
I do, Gore, and that's a great question, because when I think back, these changes in my lifetime, my experience in work, they happen over an extended period of time. It may take 3 years, it may take 5 years, it may even take 10 years for these disruptions to work themselves through. That's the scope of the disruption, the detailed use cases, the return on investment, the marketing materials, the education, all that package that goes into it. And I think today, speaking about AI, what we saw taking 5 years, let's say, in the sort of last couple of chapters of my technical sort of digital world in fashion, will happen in a matter of weeks or months at the most. Weeks and months, not years. So I think this is critical for people to understand. And coming back to your question now around generative AI, I think for me, generative AI will take advantage of all those solutions and libraries that we have within the fashion industry. Now, that might be, let's be a little bit more specific now. So it might be a material library, for example, where somebody's collected and designed materials, and they may have this digital library of tens of thousands of images, of material images. We can bring them into a generative AI model. What I would say, though, because I hear a lot being said about AI, and I just think, no, I'm sorry, but you've got that wrong. And I'm not being rude to people. It's part of the learning curve. But, for me, it's a small language model. In fact, a very small, preferably, in the fashion industry. We don't have the huge amounts of data. We do on basic text and English. We use all the different languages and translate and maths and things like that, yes. But in the generative scope of this question, we're in the small world, right? So we have tens of thousands of fabrics. What we need to do is tag those fabrics, label those fabrics, explain what a plain fabric is, what a plaid is, what a different weave type is, the method of how that material is constructed and how it's colored and what a print is versus a plain and things like this. But once we've done that and we have put that into our private model, using our own design DNA, then we can use AI, teach AI, generative AI, to deliver product, to deliver newness from the original design DNA. And that's just on a fabric. So imagine then we add to those fabrics color. How many colors do we have? Do we have Pantone with 2,500 colors? Do we have Scott Dick? Do we have Bros? What are the different color palettes that we use within our particular fashion brand? What are the latest colors and latest trends? And how do we take them from let's say, a Pantone reference to a screen, a CMYK, RGB color, a certain print? So we're now getting into color recipes, dye recipes, things like that. Those are the labels that we need to attach to the single color, yellow, and then the Pantone reference 12-digit, and so on and so forth. So we get deeper and deeper and deeper with labeling that color, and then we apply it into that fabric engine and say, now take these and experiment and give me lots of newness. And as you and I both know, it takes weeks and months to develop that. But once we've developed that, it then takes a matter of seconds and at the most minutes to deliver newness that today our designers may take hours each to do. And that's the reality of life. We can start to export newness in seconds.
There's a lot in that example that you've given.
Yeah, exactly.
It's because it requires what I mentioned in my introduction to my channel, a video I did of a kind of monologue where I just talk to the audience. It requires top level of the brands, companies, just generally, to know that they have to do that, to decide to invest in that. And then it needs that mid-management or the executive team to be able to deliver. So it requires an investment in time, investment in money, that then has also a consequence to the actual people doing the work. And like you said, it does take time to develop these tools, and you're actually required to develop these tools because, like you said, if you don't take part in this, you stand the risk of losing business, market share, and even potentially being a real risk to the company. But once you do it, suddenly your certain departments shrink. Your bottom line, your profit margins might actually go up, but there's consequences to the kind of staff that you need to hold. Are you already seeing it with some of the brands you're working with? Are you already kind of seeing some of the consequences happening, or how things are starting to evolve, or is it early days in your opinion?
For me, my experience and where we are right now, I think the use cases are just enormous. I just picked fabric and color, didn't I? But at the same time, we could take trend, which is real-time trend, literally what happened in the last hour in a certain country, in a region of a country, in a certain demographic. Give me that information back. That enables me to build a prompt that then drives my image library. So my image library may be sketches and so on, that then drives a collection of newness, which then feeds into materials and color and follows that workflow. So I could just sit here for hours talking about the potential use cases that AI will drive in the fashion industry. And there are literally tens of thousands of them. But I think there's a point you missed on that last message that you gave. It's just a tiny point, but I think it's very important. But the answer to building these AI models comes from the people doing completing the task today. And that might be a garment tech. It might be a footwear engineer. It may be a designer. It may be a textile design person, or it may be a designer designing a product design. But these are the people that can really enable these models because they know what they do. And what we've now got to do is teach them a new language, an additional language, a new layer, if you like, on what they do today. And when they pick up a pencil and sketch, or they go to Adobe Illustrator and they sketch using vector images and so on and so forth, we need to translate that into a text prompt, into a request. What are we going to ask this model to do in the future? And in order for that model to answer that question concisely and with benefit, what do we need to build into the model? And these are the people at the edge, right at the edge. The people doing the work are the people we need more than ever. Initially, I think they'll look at the large language AI models and use those to generate benefit for the business, and that's fine. Use them as research bots and whatever. But equally, use those models to define what's happening in the world of their consumer base and so on and so forth. But when we get into these smaller language models, these people have got the next 2 to 3 years to help build the content inside and develop these engines and clean out the ripples, smooth out these ripples, smooth out the problems and teach this model to perform accurately. Right? We need accuracy. We all hear the horror stories about using AI and AI coming back with a confident answer that is actually wrong. So we have not got to make those mistakes. That's why I want to use our own fashion DNA, design DNA. I want to use our own data. Yes, we will share large language data. It's common sense that we would use a dictionary and things like that. But when it comes to our detail, we'll use our own so that we do not have hallucinations coming out and if you like, have potential copyright issues. So for the first couple of years, it's all about getting that model right, cleaning out any issues. But at the end of that 2 to 3 years, let's be honest, that's when we have the incredible efficiency gains. Mm-hmm. And what 10 people are doing today, or for that matter, 100 designers are doing today, a handful will do tomorrow. When we get to sort of 3 years from now, once that model is built, it's then about how do we feed the model and how does the model absorb that information and make sense of it and use it efficiently and smartly. But frankly, there will come a time where we have to look at jobs and job roles. There are jobs now that we don't have that we need. But there are jobs that we have, if they do not change and adapt, they will no longer be required. That's the reality.
Yeah. I mean, I will talk about the employability and employment issue. So you and I worked with a company that was designing and providing services in the footwear industry. Impressed me that for not a big company. I mean, they're not small, but they're not one of the big companies out there. But their designers started working with AI image generation tools, which is very good, very, very important that they were already kind of thinking quickly on those lines and at least testing what the capabilities are. What we saw is what probably most designers, most people in image generation is that artificial intelligent image generation right now is not specific, it's not accurate. Right? So we tested the more general kind of large models out there. They're using the data that's out in public. And then we were able to show them that you can train it on your own small models. So we actually showed how using stable diffusion and teaching it, creating LoRa models or just models on a specific kind of design, you can actually get a design assistant going now, today, just to get ideation going. That's at the stage we're at. I don't think we've moved past that too far, really. It's still there at that point. Yes. I see it when I brand, as I've been branding my YouTube. I'll probably share with the audience about how I create some of this imagery, and I still need to go and manually do a lot of work, but it saves me a lot of time. So the question we got, you and I, was, okay, what do I need to develop my own brand DNA model, right? And we kind of did this, with a bit of experience that we have of how much it takes. And we said, you do need to invest a year or so, a bit more maybe, with a couple of software engineers, data scientists, someone semi-technical, but you need someone technical or two to actually develop the models. So you're coming up to a cost. I mean, it's $1 million, $1.5 million to develop something. If you want your own personal model as a brand, it could be more. So I agree with you that it needs, just like you, when you were young, in your 20s, you developed processes and you said, how do I make my life easier or work? Yes. And here you want the designers and the planners and, everyone in that doing the work, doing the actual hard work, coming up with ideas, but they need to know, or it needs to join the people with the money, with the checkbook, to say, okay, I'm going to put $500,000 into developing in-house tools, proprietary tools, to be able to enjoy in 2 years' time that efficiency gain. And I think my guess is that a lot of businesses, but I might be wrong, for sure, is that they are kind of waiting and hoping for off-the-shelf packages to come off, just like in 3D. You had Browserclo and all these guys,
Yes.
all these software developers in management software, hoping that they're going to get these packages, software tools, and they'll just learn like them how they learned all the software that we're currently using and just keep going as is. My instinct is saying that that's not going to be the same model anymore. By definition of artificial generative intelligence, it requires you to work to your language, to your, like you said, DNA. And therefore it requires you to start building unique, almost, tools within your organization to be able to really enjoy the benefits to come.
Absolutely. And you're spot on there, Gore. If those brands and retailers, and for that matter, their manufacturers, wait around for the software developers that we have today, the software companies, to create AI tools that they can wait for and then utilize them and answer the question, the bigger question of utilizing AI, then frankly, they're wrong. For those who think they can wait, well, I'm sorry, you stand a massive chance of getting hurt, financially and efficiently. You will need to start to develop tools because we don't have a pure end-to-end workflow that's got AI, in every single solution. If we take design, for example, Adobe has already started and is building AI into its suite of products. Okay. And other tools like product lifecycle management will over time build AI efficiencies into PLM so that PLM will work smartly, more efficiently, and faster. So we've got the design front end, we'll have the PLM, we'll have planning tools, all the different tools. They're general, if you like. If you rely on them, you're relying on general. We're back to that question of large language models. You are getting what they decide is right for a general purpose, whereas you, the brand and retailer, as a specific requirement, will require your own smaller models that will work with those. Yes, it will ingest information, it will generate newness, and it will output. But without those, you're in this large language model general world, and you can't be in a general world. You need to be in a detailed, you need to be specific. You need to drive from trend to design to development, whether that's digital or physical, and so on, up that value chain. And therefore, you need AI. And you can't wait around for the rest of the world to develop it on your behalf because it will be general.
Yeah. Back to employability, employment issues. Maybe I'm a bit of a pessimist on this front, or skeptical about the fear that people have, the anxiety. I think is real, and it kind of should be real. And thinking about human behavior, and also especially business behavior, which is based on human behavior. You know this better than me, is that even many of the global brands, they're like huge, massive ships that take so much time to steer. But just the way we humans are programmed is that we take time to actually get things done. So, one, do you see that because of that inherent human condition, are we going to slow the implementation of AI because we're slow? And considering that artificial intelligence is going to start shrinking departments down, does that cause a situation where the big companies take time to shift? Suddenly, skilled labor is getting released from the industry, are able to, or even new, not necessarily the people leaving the companies, but even new people entering the industry. I mean, you've got plenty of individuals starting to say, suddenly opening up their own fashion brand. There's thousands and thousands of them in this world that pop up, right? Because they suddenly go online on e-commerce and they're able to sell product and earn a living from it. With these new tools and this capability that they suddenly have, this power, do you see that actually causing risk to the big brands? Suddenly a lot more small brands are opening up because they're able to do marketing using AI, design using AI, planning using AI. They're able to start building their own little processes using these free tools, many of them, and get to consumers quick, where a Nike or a Zara of this world might kind of be still having discussions in their meeting rooms about how to adapt. Long question, sorry.
Okay, so long question. I've broken it up into 4 little sub-questions here that I want to answer. It's a global problem, right? It's one of the biggest problems we have is education. And it reminds me back in, computerization, when we first brought the PCs, the personal computer, to the industry. The people we were talking to were used to mainframe computers in this huge room with air conditioning and so on and so forth. And they knew that these people in white coats used to go in that room and something came out right. It was a bit like that. And we had to then say that, by the way, that big thing in there that's the size of a truck is going to be, the size of a small table, and you'll be able to use it. The world has an issue, right? The world has a big issue, and that's around education. If we, let's say we're the board of university today, and we decide that we want to bring AI into a course, develop a course on artificial intelligence for our fashion students, then the first thing we've got to do is think about what that means, what that's going to look like. We need to educate the lecturers in order to deliver that course, the course subject matter. We need to put that course into the government body to say whether or not they're going to approve that course, which would then go across out to the universities. So that's a 2-year project. By the way, I'm sitting on Manchester Metropolitan University Board in Manchester here, so I understand that. So that's a 2-year, right? Then we have the students themselves who are going to do a 4-year course, maybe a sandwich course with a year out in industry, but essentially 4 years. So we've got 2 years plus 4 years. We've got 6 years. My concern and huge fear, and I don't have the answer for it yet, is that education, fashion education, delivering students of tomorrow are not equipped for today. And when I say today, AI is here. It's moving. It's on the road. The rubber has hit the road. It's going. And we need to address that issue. How do we find a solution to the education issue? Now, a lot of those students will resolve this themselves. They'll do their own research, their own education. We know students are savvy. They're smart, especially Gen Z and Gen Alpha. They've been born into computers. They've got a computer on the wrist. They've got a computer in the pockets. They understand it. So what have they been doing? They've been using AI. They've been using the Einstein on the shoulder here to already do some of the research work and so on. So much so that the universities have been nervous that this AI has been doing the work for the students, right? So they find ways. So students need to continue to find ways to understand how AI works. We also have a shortage of skills. We need people who understand data to come into every process within trend, design, development, manufactures, the entire end-to-end workflow. We need data. people who understand data. We need to do the obvious, organize that data, clean that data, understand that data, tag that data, expand that data. So we need to engineer the data and add to the data. And then for me, let's just say education and new skilled people will come in the same way as 3D, Gore. Because if you remember the early days of 3D, when you and I used to talk about it years ago, we talked about architects joining the fashion industry. We talked about, these people who build houses using 3D tools that was common to them actually coming in. We saw gamers moving from the gaming world, building avatars and skins in games, coming to the fashion industry. And all of a sudden we saw a melting pot, and we saw a lot of new people and new skills. This will, I'm certain we'll see the same thing. We'll see data scientists say, well, I can actually get a job in the fashion industry and bring my skills to it. So you're going to see people who are going into mathematics and things like that in university saying, there's a job here. You touched on brands and retailers being disrupted by new, more agile and fast learning new entrants to the industry. And I'm going to call them new entrants for a second, but let's just assume that those are smart students. They've done this 4-year course. They've had a year out in manufacturing, and they can come out with this. I want to be my own brand. I want to do it myself. Well, when I started in technology in 1985, it was millions of dollars to get these products. We talked in millions. We didn't talk in thousands. We talked millions of dollars. Today, you can rent the Adobe Suite, $50, $80 a month. You can rent PLM solutions between $80 and $150 per month for a product lifecycle management solution that enables you to go end to end with lots of smart modules in there. You can use or build small AI tools. You can, even if you didn't build the model right now, you would certainly use AI. And I keep tapping my shoulder here because I use it every day. I have Einstein on my shoulder every day. I have been since the beginning using AI as my assistant. I talk to it like a real person. I use it, it helps me. And they will do this faster than industry, and therefore they will come out and they'll be able to get a brand going. There may be some seeding fund from friends, from relatives, from angel investors, from whoever, but they can get these things going. And as you touched on, today they'll be able to print onto roll or print onto piece, onto the garment. So print to garment, print to roll. They will be able to make smaller orders, and we have manufacturers coming together whether they are, local, meaning in country, or whether they're just a few days off, they're a week away, meaning that by designing, developing, manufacturing something, they can get it to you in a week's time. So for me in the UK, I may be talking about Portugal in my reference here, or something like that. Or Eastern Europe, but even, further afield in Asia, we're getting to the ability to make smaller orders and faster. The biggest disruption I see coming is Web3, is the next generation of the internet. So we saw the first generation of the internet coming in 1995. We then saw the second generation, where we started to see lots of e-commerce sites, building. We saw the world being influenced by all those influencers. We're now going to go to Web3, where we're getting to the, more personalized, and even allowing those future customers to work with us and design with us. They could become their own creators. They could have an idea of what they want, generate it, and then pass that generated product to us, or use our model and we will then take it through the value chain and get it made for them so that they can have that individualized, highly personalized product. That will happen. Mark my words. That's like me saying the internet's coming in 1995, where some said, I'm talking Star Trek, if you remember, and others said, yes, let's get on board. But those that say it isn't going to happen, the deniers, be careful. You're going to get burned because it is coming.
Right. And I would say, I assume the big brands, the global brands, all the known brands, if they're not sitting around trying to figure out, okay, how do we make moves? You can't fight it. It's just like Hollywood's trying to fight, all this artificial intelligent tools that are coming out with regulations. You can't stop this. Independent filmmakers are going to come in and compete with you, whether you like it or not. So is it the same in the fashion industry where they almost have to say, okay, how do we start reinventing ourselves to, maintain our brand identity? That name, that logo has to still stick in our minds, in the collective, in the world. But they'll have to deliver their product in a different way. They'll have to advertise their product, market it, and also know that there's still a finite amount of business out there to go for, right? It's growing, but they, suddenly when there's more players in the market, they have to say, okay, we'll have to keep our profits up. And they'll have to address this issue of more competition in the market.
They will. They will get disruptors. Disruptors will and do come, but disruptors will come faster because they'll be greatly enabled by the tools we're talking about. But I do feel the industry does have an opportunity here, and it has an opportunity in a way to address a few things. And one important thing is it can. If it plans for Web3, it will be able to engage with its current customers, but allow its customers to get more involved. So let the customers become the creators of that brand. Let them work together. And at the same time, then you get a made-to-order or a mass customization model that will enable them to deliver for the individual, highly personalized, as we said. They will be able to do these, and they'll be able to do them in a new model. And the spin-off, the benefits are that instead of doing mass volume orders, we'll be able to do smaller orders made for that particular region, that particular customer set in a mass customization, meaning that we'll do maybe tens of thousands instead of hundreds of thousands, and maybe we'll do hundreds, and maybe then we'll get right down to the made to order, that single person who has a specific requirement, right? And we get down to that level. The technology is there, the platforms need to be built, but the underlying technology is there. We need to join the dots now to enable that, so that when Web3 arrives, these current traditional brands and retailers don't get caught out. They're able to be involved. But in between, and they're already starting, you'll get one-off companies that are operating in the world of Web3, and their customers will be receiving highly personalized products. Keep in mind what that does for ESG, our environmental sustainability goals. Just think of what that achieves. We deliver what you and I want, specifics. The spin-off, we don't have 10 garments sitting on the shelf that are never going to get sold that end up in landfill. So we've got enormous benefits for the environment.
Yeah, it's the sustainability aspect of fashion can be benefited big time. It's already being benefited in the calculations of sustainability. And that's a good example also of where the tools are out there, the capabilities are out there. Human slowness is taking time to implement them and get the benefits. Exactly. Yeah, for sure, if I'm starting into fashion, if you've got an entrepreneurial spirit, you'd be doing some research and figuring out how do you I mean, it costs very little now to test, to try, to kind of say, okay, I'm going to try to create my own fashion brand, little fashion brand, and just sell locally and just see how it catches. I mean, I spoke to a lady here who goes to the gym with me, and she said, okay, I've started doing this beachwear little brand. And they just started, selling locally, selling to people that they know on Facebook and all social media. So they've just started. They're tiny. And I said to her, well, how are you marketing? How are you? And it's the standard, sharing on Facebook, sharing on Instagram. And I said to her, well, and I already showed her some of the free design tools using Stable Diffusion. So there's been a few companies already set up applications that are API to Stable Diffusion's open source models.
Yes.
That allows you to kind of do a basic virtual try-on tool. New people coming in can already test that, can already say, okay, I can get a job in the fashion industry, but on the side hustle, I can start building my own little brand. If that starts taking off, bye-bye Gap, and just, I'm going to start building this thing. And like you said, they can source locally or they can source quite close. So somebody around Europe, do a bit of research, or if they've through their Manchester University, who are the producers in Portugal and where can I manufacture? I assume the resources, they can get that quite quickly. You can communicate with them online. You don't need to travel, right? You're communicating with drawings. So the ideation stages is so quick and so easy. And it's a question of how creative you are, how adaptable you are, and that would be my advice to the young kind of generation coming into this industry. Like you said, the universities have 4-year courses. 4 years in artificial intelligence time is an eternity where I cannot predict where we are in 4 years. I keep trying and saying what's going to happen. I always pause and then make my prediction. I always say...
You make me think about what you said earlier on when we started talking, when you accidentally said general.
Yeah.
And when we arrive at that point, and I think we will over time, when we do arrive at that point, then it's a different conversation completely. But at the moment, like you say, it still is. It's happening in weeks and months. And I remember you and I talking together last year, and we were trying to predict what would happen, and within just, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks of you and I talking, then we had, if you remember, prompts to video appeared 2 weeks after we'd been saying what would happen in the next 3 months, 6 months. It just came out of the blue. So, yes, it's happening very fast.
What would be then your broad stroke that you say to the global brands that you advise all the time, and the universities even?
For me, the highest level is to educate them on what the art of the possible is when it comes to AI. What is AI? What is it? What does it mean? And how can it be applied into their businesses to support current processes, solutions, and relationships with other solutions? How do we, as you've said, integrate them through these open application protocol interfaces, the programs where we're sharing information across the entire value chain? We've got to think of a more truly integrated value chain that uses artificial intelligence, talking about the opportunities across the entire value chain. We've touched on a few. We've touched on trend, we've touched on design, we've touched on PLM, but in each of those, there's many different opportunities. And there's also new partnerships where we can get this, let's call it fuel, the data that then can move and be utilized across so that 1 + 1 = 5 rather than 1 + 1 = 2. Let's, it accelerates value. And how do we build our own? And what does that building our own mean? To some people, it's terrifying. They straight away they think large language models, ChatGPT comes to mind, hundreds of millions of dollars with hundreds and thousands of people who have this opportunity from the big boys to invest but no. Let's separate that from the real world reality. We both know that we have built a design model on behalf of Goldline, the UK footwear company, that's enabled them to deliver product in a matter of seconds from that unique DNA. And we need to do that. And they need to do that. The industry needs to do that to start to bring it in, prove its value, then move to the next piece. And there are so many bubbles to deliver, if you like, in that universe of systems that they have in any particular organization. We need to pick them off. Which ones will give us the greatest benefit? Which will benefit the company? And it's not just financially. It might be benefit it in delivering newness, or benefit it in delivering time and value and efficiency and so on. But whatever the drivers are, we need to pick them off and manage them in the same way we've managed a product now. We research the product, we research what it's going to, the problem it's going to solve, how long it will take it to build, and what it will deliver. But in this case, when we build, it's build and then reuse, meaning build for this particular use case, now drive. Remember I said material library, then I taught color. The two are interrelated. Once we have a material in a composition that we're going to weave in a certain type, that we're going to source from this factory, that is going to be in this substrate, now we need to design it and color it, right? So they are related. We've got to sort of do 1, then +1, and the 1 + 1 = more. And we just keep expanding that across the value chain.
And the final message to the decision makers?
Don't hold back waiting too long. You can't afford. There's nothing wrong with a brand, whatever size, to say, let's think about this carefully. Let's take a look at what's going on in the world. But you can't wait. You need to start the education process moving. You need somebody in the organization who's responsible for bringing AI in all its different models into the business, whether it's simple research tools, like I said, on my shoulder, my little Einstein every day, that would be day one. That's your large language model. But how do we trust that information? Teach people how to use it, how to develop prompts. What is a prompt? Develop that. How to get accuracy, test the accuracy, prove the accuracy, and then keep moving that through your business. Build your own model. Yeah. What do you need to build the model? As you said, use also some tools, simple tools.
Yeah, so because they've got to dare. They've got to
in the water. You've got to get in and test and play and experiment. Don't sit back and say, we'll wait until other people develop it for us. By that time, you may be too late.
Yeah, so be prepared to invest. Dare to kind of go for it.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's start the process moving.
Right. Great. I mean, we can go on for hours as usual, but
we do.
But yeah, thanks a lot for all that kind of thought process. I'm sure it'll help the viewers. So yeah, thanks, Mark. It's
an absolute pleasure, and thank you for getting this ball rolling. We need channels like this. We need to help educate and be questioned.
Thanks.
So, thank you, Gore.
All right, we'll speak soon.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
So thanks to Mark for sharing some of his wisdom. I'll put the link to the online fashion technology magazine and resource center called the Interline that he founded on the description below. There you'll find many of the articles that he wrote about new technologies. Thank you for listening in, and be sure to hit that like button or do subscribe to hear more of these conversations. And do join the discussions in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. See you next time.